When we are children, the world is such a magical place. We are inquisitive with a sense of wonder and a keen interest to learn and experience our environments. At a very young age, I was labeled dyslexic. When I started out making this short, I thought I was going to talk about a problem. But then I realized it's not that at all. The problem is not the person, but the educational methods. The more I spoke and listened to people, I realized that many of us have this gift. It is the gift of dyslexia.
Okay. There's another interesting factor, and that is we talk about the right hemisphere of the brain having slightly different functions to the left hemisphere. And the left hemisphere is a language hemisphere.
Okay.
And the right hemisphere tends to be associated with visual spatial information. More with that.
Okay.
Right. Now, and in terms of schoolwork, the right hemisphere would affect reading, math, spelling.
Yeah. It was explained to me once. I spoke to a teacher that was doing special education. She was training for it because they didn't really have anything at the schools. And she said she understood that the eye saw it backwards. The eye saw it when it transmitted to the brain. It wasn't transmitted the same way. Yeah, it was transmitted backwards. That's the perception she told me it was.
You really try hard to retain information, because if you have to start reading it over and over again, it's just like, oh please, it's time consuming. That's why it used to take me 3 and 4 hours to do high school work, and everybody else, oh, I didn't even have to do anything. My sister Maria never studied, and that was very frustrating, watching other people growing up, and you're spending the whole night working on something which comes so easily to other people.
The issue is that, number one, people who have learning disabilities, as I say, have average to above average intelligence, right? So that they have that potential. Number two, we are constrained by schooling. So for the years from kindergarten up until you leave school, you are identified and constrained by what school expects of you. You've got to be able to read and write, and not only that, you've got to go from one subject to the next subject and use different thinking abilities, and you're supposed to be really good at everything. And you can't possibly be, and people who have learning disabilities, if you have difficulty with the reading and writing, the literacy part of school, you're going to feel really lousy about yourself because you're just not going to make the grade.
We would work at home with Paula. Was like 4 years.
So did you?
And what I did was, when I saw that you were having the same, we took you to be assessed and have your IQ done. And you were far, far above normal IQ. You had a very high IQ. But you still had the same problem. But when you were kids, I read to you a lot, always. And because of reading to you, perhaps you retained all this information, so you had a high IQ because of what you were introduced to.
Grade 2, they started really, pushing the writing part of it, and the teacher said to me, and it was a nun, that I was supposed to write with my right hand instead of my left hand. So, and still to this day, I write like a left-handed person with my right hand. But some things I use my left hand, and some things I use my right hand for. No, she's right. It did make me feel very much so.
Would you feel different from?
More of a, sorry.
That's
loner.
pretty good. Sorry.
For the children, it was frustrating. I didn't find it frustrating because I always saw progress. In school, it was difficult for the children because they didn't explain it to the other children, and they would sometimes make fun of them because they couldn't stand up and read as the others did. For the children, it was hard. And it hurts you because they're hurting. But the
Did it drive self-esteem issues?
it does. It does totally. It totally. Paula was a very outgoing child until this issue came up. She would be dancing. She would perform. She would do all sorts of things. Once this started happening, she started to be very careful of what she said. She was afraid to do things. Her self-confidence was almost all gone because of this. And Edward too.
Accelerated moments of learning and understanding are driven by passion and excitement. If passions are arrested by negative labels and words such as disabilities, the atmosphere of learning is clouded by self-esteem issues and feelings of inadequacy, not healthy for any learning environment.
The largest number of dropouts are learning disabled. Now, if we have 5 to 10% of learning disabilities in the population, then we should have 5 to 10% of people who have crises in their lives in the population, and that's not so. 50% or more of the jail population are learning disabled. Teen suicides, drug addicts, teen pregnancies,
Wow.
like
Say
enormous
that
percentage.
again? What? All of those categories you just mentioned, how do they relate to being learning disabled?
Just as they are, because they didn't succeed at school and they haven't, and
But-
they're very vulnerable.
But on the same vein, there must be those that don't, I guess, suppose, demonstrate a learning disability that have all those same issues.
Yeah, but then 90% of the population should be non-learning disabled. So your prison population, 90% of them should be able to be literate and so on.
Well, that's saying that there's an equal representation of criminals between the 90 and 10.
Right, but that's not so.
There isn't, is it?
There isn't. The higher percentage are learning disabled. And they land up in jail for a number of different reasons. The one is that it's the highest dropout rate. That far exceeds the number of represented in the population, in the school population. Number 2, so there's that. 2, they can't get jobs. Number 3, they have social issues. So they have trouble getting on.
So their ability
or
to
they're
fit,
very,
right?
and they're very vulnerable.
So, and I think sometimes people take advantage of people that have disabilities. They see a weakness in somebody. You know, sometimes people have that shark mentality. Oh, I know what that problem is, so we're gonna pounce on it. And there's a lot of mean people out there that can see that, you know, maybe you have an inferiority complex or you're self-conscious, and kids can be very mean. And I think that's why a lot of kids go the wrong way. They get into trouble because they're frustrated and they just don't understand what the problem is with what they're feeling. And that's probably why they drop out of school, because they're so frustrated and they're not getting the marks, or they get expelled or whatever. And
So it's a self-confidence issue. It's because of the way they're treated in class, in school. They felt that they were belittled because they couldn't read properly, and other kids would make fun of them. You know how children are quite cruel, and they would say they're dumb and they're stupid, they can't read and what have you. And this is a very hard thing for a child to go through.
So when you're outside of school, then you have the ability to use what are your strengths, which might not have been well shown at school. So if you have a musical strength and you have an oral language strength, which you obviously do in your music and in your words and all the rest of it, if you could have been able to show that at school, you would have done unbelievably well. Right. But you were made to feel like, you know, a bit of a second-class citizen.
So,
around.
would you say that there's a rise in the amount of people that are showing forms of autism and,
Yes.
and dyslexia? I heard a
enormous
statistic
amount.
the other day that was saying it went from about 10 years ago to being 1 in 10,000 to now being 1
Yeah.
in 165.
Something like that. In the last 5 years, they say that there's been a 500% increase in autism.
Any idea of your
Why?
spatial perceptions to what it might be because of?
Not on tape.
Okay.
Really?
Education has been in a continual state of development for so many years as a result of ever-changing needs and environments. Recognition of these kinds of people requires a framework for them to flourish outside of the academic field. It has the equivalency and gravity to food and agriculture and just about any aspect of growth that makes our culture and society strong.
In
Okay,
certain ways.
I'm going to ask you a question. Let's say that you would have been academically, been able to read and didn't have problems like this. Do you think that you would not be musically creative? You've got the answer, not me.
My answer's the same as yours. I don't know. I don't know. But from an early age, I've just always known that this is what I was supposed to do. It's almost like somebody said, you're supposed to be here to write these songs.
I think that there's the issue of to your own self be true.
Mm-hmm. Well,
That, which is exactly that, and you know, and you hear this so often, make it your own, make your sound your own, make your music your own. I know this even in my teaching, that I go through a phase where I say, well, gee, all the other lecturers are doing this and this and this, maybe I should be doing that too, and then I start going along that line, and I go,
Right.
no, that's not me.
That's great.
And you know what? If you like me the way I am, that's great. And if you don't, you know what? I'll. There was a beautiful Dorothy Parker little poem that I memorized when I was a lot younger, but I still remember it. And it went like this: in youth it was the way I had to do my best to please, and change with every passing lad to suit his theories. But now I know the things I know and do the things I do. And if you do not like me so, to hell my love with you.
I used to believe I had a problem, but it's actually a gift. The problem is recognition of individual strengths and potentials, and a generalized framework of learning. The key is the ever-changing system that fits the individual, not the individual that fits the system. Perhaps it is the struggle that makes us stronger. That is the gift of dyslexia.